So this talk is about 4 challenges using Drupal and React at Edutopia.
Yeah. Only 4?
Only 4. They're carefully chosen. My name is Eric Hestenes. I'm Director of Engineering at Edutopia.
And my name is Nicole Davison. I'm a software engineer at Edutopia.
So a little bit about Edutopia. So our philosophy, we're a nonprofit. We're focused on K-12 education. Our philosophy is to shine a light on what's working in education. Our website is edutopia.org, and I'd invite you to, if the Wi-Fi cooperates, go take a look. It's decoupled, so we have a front end, and we have data services, and we have data moving across, not pages, data. So why are we here today? We launched a new site, this complete rebuild in January. It's a team effort with Edutopia and Lullabot. We're a very small team, and so we work closely with agency partners to get things done. And at DrupalCon Nashville, both Nicole and I were there, and we heard a lot about decoupled, but we did not see examples that were quite like what we've been doing. And so we thought it would be great to share some of the things that challenges we had to overcome as part of our system build. We want to share what we've learned. We thought some of these patterns may be interesting to others, and indeed I've been hearing some of this in other talks during the show today. So a little bit about what's the upside of decoupling for us. And just to be clear, we have Drupal 8 on the back end, we have Node and React on the front end, and other things on the front end. But some of the goals are to get a better separation of concerns, to have a higher degree of control over the front end experience, and the middle tier as well, to tap into the JavaScript community and ecosystem. So there's a huge community of developers doing work on front-end technology, and we wanted to be able to take advantage of that. In our environment, what we've found is that the velocity of our front-end changes is just much higher than the back-end. That's kind of a virtue. So what it's meant for us is that our back-end can be more stable. We actually have a smaller footprint on the back-end. We have fewer modules, and there's a lot less change in the back-end. Our application is a lot smarter than it used to be. So it's truly an application, and we can do things by being smart about how we use the network, and interactivity between pages can be more sophisticated than what we could do in the past. So today we're going to talk about 4 challenges. Responsive images, dealing with responsive images, and in the Gatsby talk we heard a little bit about this as well. I think this is a challenge that many will confront when you're decoupling. How you do resolving URLs. We're a legacy site. We had a Drupal 7 site. We have more than 10,000 pieces of content. We had to do migrations. So we needed to address how URL patterns get mapped to front-end data structures. We also had to address how to have a preview system for our editors. And then another use case that I heard people ask about in DrupalCon is how to get more flexible landing pages where editors can influence what you see on the screen. So I'll start with the first of the 4, the media challenge. So we had a master image library that is in Drupal 7 that has our source media. It's a standalone Drupal system, and it automates the cropping from a single master image into many crops. And we also had a requirement to have support for focal points, so that when you crop, you get an appropriate, the image zooms in the right way for the responsive breakpoint or situation that it's being displayed. And so we needed a way to generate responsive images, and a way to use those images in our content. And in the front, when you have a decoupled environment, that's not actually clear how you do that. And we also did not want to directly expose files on our back-end Drupal server. So Nicole's going to talk about how we did this.
Yeah, so we had that master image library, which basically we were using the fly system module to upload those images to S3. And at first we had attempted just to use Drupal just to do like image resizing completely, which did not work very well. It was pretty slow. Yeah, there were a couple of other issues like not being able, well, at the time we were just going to generate like every single cropped image that we needed, and And I had at first set it up in a queue system so that it would, use batch jobs to process it, but it just didn't work out very well. So I ended up using a Lambda to do it. And like a lot of this, you could probably just find some utilities that will just kind of, you could just turn on and do this if you have images in an S3 bucket. But because we had the focal point thing, I actually ended up making a back-end endpoint that basically described what the image sizes were and where the focal points were for like a specific object, and then Lambda actually accesses that and then generates an image based off of that. And how it works is that if there is no CloudFront is set up so that if it redirects, if there's like a 307 redirect to a 403 image, so the image doesn't exist, then it will actually go and look for the master image based off of the path, and then it will basically create an image from that and upload it there. And that's pretty much it. And that link there is very similar to the solution that we currently have at the bottom.
Great. So another of the challenges we had to confront is that we had, to be generous, we'll just say our legacy pages were not strictly organized. We had a lot of history where the URL patterns have changed over time, and we didn't want to change the URL patterns because we had social stats attached to the different URL patterns. But when you decouple, you have to be more strict. You have to have a very clear mapping between a particular URL and the functionality that you want to render. So an example for us is we have a lot of legacy content that has this URL pattern with /blog, and now we use /article. The front end doesn't know which endpoint to hit, so we needed a robust solution for handling the URL.
So we actually have a custom endpoint that actually can take a parameter called URL slug, and and then it uses Drupal to resolve that URL slug, then it basically serializes that object with JSON API, and then returns that. So that way, all of our legacy content that doesn't fit the correct pattern can actually be served that way. And I think I had heard something the other day that pretty soon JSON API will be supporting being able to use URL patterns, right? So right. Maybe we.
No, I don't know if that's in the.
Not necessarily. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I thought I had heard that, but okay.
I was thinking about ways we could have a contrib module help with that.
Okay. Perfect. Well, I'd be very interested in that one. But yeah, and that's basically how we're handling it.
Right. Yeah. Okay. So the next challenge is previews. So we have an editorial team. We produce content every day, sometimes many pieces of content a day. And we're coupled. That means that the Drupal system doesn't know how to render our pages. So we needed a way to allow our editors to preview. And also JSON API doesn't directly support revisions. It doesn't not support them. It just isn't aware of revisions. So we needed a way to get a specific revision and then configure the front end to use that revision.
Yes.
A patch coming in the next week or two.
In the next, so this is not going to be you're going to be able to use something different than what we did right here. So we had a normalizer override the entity part of JSON API, and basically we're just looking at the response object for a parameter called revision ID, and from that we're getting the entity that we want to preview, and then passing it to the JSON API, the rest of the JSON API module to process. And and also on our Node VM, we do have a separate environment specifically for preview. So it basically has our same full like JavaScript stack, but it's just has like I think a couple of different things for preview on it, and that we're kind of using that to kind of lock down who can see into preview from that. Yeah, and it's the same engine. It's like exactly the same.
Okay. So
Yeah, and so we do have some demos of preview, like how it looks for our content editors. So they basically would go into Drupal, and this would be like the page they would see, and they would, create some content. And then down here, because we're using workflows to basically create revisions every time they go in and they create a piece of content or update a piece of content, and then they can actually click to see a preview, like on the back end view page for it. And from that, they actually like hit the preview front end with that. Also, I did, we have like a part of it like extracted that on GitHub that was like specific to preview and how we actually did it with the normalizers. And that's linked there. And also, Matt Robeson, this article here.
shout out to Matt.
Yeah, he actually did a lot of work on this. Almost like I think most of the back end stuff that we're talking about is Matt's. Yeah.
Okay, landing pages. So we had a Drupal 7 site, and it had an existing solution that was based on Panelizer, which is a Drupal 7 functionality, but we needed to move it into a decoupled environment. And what we wanted to do was allow customized landing pages to be prepared with minimal effort and no coding involved. So editors have the ability to create those. And the question is how to do that in a decoupled environment. So I'll give some examples. So these are some of the layout examples you'll see on our website. We have a page about topics, and there's multiple topics. These are all automatically generated, though there's ways to manually generate them. These are 4 different layouts, and so this is a little bit about what the experience looks like to the editor, and some of the details are that there's at the bottom there's a number of different types of templates that they can choose from, and so that's what we're seeing here is we have a large grid, a small grid, we have a feature, we have a simple listing, and there's parameters for things like pagination. And then these can all be combined into our pages. So you want to show the actual page?
Oh, yeah. We can
Get that
get pages.
tab up.
Yeah. Right here. Let's see. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the actual page, and it's fully responsive. Let's see how well this works. So it works great on mobile as well. And each of these are again driven by taxonomy. So we have a category about new teachers. We have another one about social and emotional learning, which is one of the core concepts that we talk about at Edutopia. Brain-based learning is another example. There's just a content type for landing pages, and here's examples of our landing pages like home videos, topics, and then you can go in as an editor. And we don't allow everyone to do this because we don't want everyone changing our landing pages, but the capability is there. It doesn't require code change to modify these. So we just have this components. It's really a custom entity, I think is what you would describe it as. We call them components. But these are the pieces that make up that page. We have a new teacher section, a newsletter. We have social and emotional learning. We have brain-based learning. And again, here's that little block that we saw. One thing I didn't show was the ability to filter by topics. So we have a lot of taxonomy terms, and you can set for this block which terms are going to be used. And you can also, in that criteria say if you want it just to be videos or articles, and you can control the sort. That's the filter criteria. And then define the component type. whether it's a list, grid, etc. And then just save. So that's pretty much how it works. So let's get back to the slides. You want to talk to this one?
Yeah, I think we pretty much covered it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go
Just
ahead.
the last bit. So like it is like a custom entity, and it does have like a field on it, which is an entity reference field that has some additional like query parameters that's like added by the save query module. So yeah.
Yeah, and in JSON API, we're using one of its features called sparse field sets. When you have these pages with tons of objects on it, we don't want all the data from those. We only want a subset. We want the specific fields that we need, so we're using sparse field sets for that. It's a little bit like GraphQL, where you would say exactly what you want to see. And there's an example of some of the one module that is underneath our code, which is save query, which is doing some caching of the query for each of the sections as they get modified. So this is an architecture picture of our system, and we have the media service, which Nicole talked about first, which is CloudFront and Lambda and S3. We have another service, which is Drupal, and we call it the resolver, but it's doing more than that. But it's basically JSON API. And then we have 3 application instances. One is the main application, one is a preview. The preview, we have that in a separate node. It's like a separate doc root, if you will. And the reason why it's separate is so that we could put different authentication on the preview if we want to tighten it down. And also the preview, we don't want the same caching qualities as we have on production, so we really don't want a preview on production. And then we also have another one for AMP, so we implement Google AMP. And then up in the distant corner, we have the browser, and we actually have a progressive web app. We have an app shell, we have React and Redux running up there. And so that's the big picture. Okay, so some of the other challenges for us, speaking for the George Lucas Educational Foundation, was one is finding the right partners to work on the problem. We have a small team. We need to find people who know what they're doing and can help us solve these problems. In some cases, we had to convince people that change was needed and necessary as we moved to decoupled. Figuring out what work is core and what work is and where to let go is really important, because we have a more complicated solution now, and we have limited time to spend on different bits and pieces, so we have to be very strategic about what we focus on and what functionality we use as services. As an example, we could have used Solar, but we're using Algolia because we really didn't want to spend a lot of time and energy, and Algolia is working great for us. We have very clean separation, but our system is more complicated. And another quality is just being persistent. We had to really be persistent to dial in and get the results that we wanted over time, but we've been able to do that. So, final thoughts. The way we're using Redux has really helped create the perception of speed. That's a state management tool that's based on the React stack, and when we load pages, we put them into Redux store, and then if you click around on our site, you'll see it's very, very fast because it's instantaneous response. It's not going back to the service to get the API response if it's already in memory. And we're using JSON API, very happy with it, but it is a moving target. It's evolving in terms of the details of the implementation, and I'm hearing that there's good things coming potentially around revisions. So revision management is one of the challenges we had for dealing with previews, and it's an example where when you depend on that, then each time that it changes, then you have to pay attention to how it's changing. For us, working with Drupal 8 was very different from what we had done in the past, so we kind of, I think, underestimated how much new there was to learn there. And that's even true even though we're using a pretty limited set of Drupal 8 functionality. And then another key point is that we have much greater dependency on our custom front end, and so it's more brittle. And it's very easy to make global changes to the front end in a way that we probably would never have dealt with before. So we own a bit more code on the front end, but that's kind of intentional. So, and overall, we are definitely more stable than we were on Drupal 7, and we have a more competitive product experience for our audience. So that's pretty much it. So any questions? Oh, yeah.
I used at one point a module for Drupal 8 to change the entire file system where it goes into public and private to Amazon S3. So I was just wondering if you used that same module, or what was the technique, or how did you?
I'm using a module called Fly System, and they have like another module that's like Fly System S3.
Okay.
Yeah, and Fly System basically just uses the PHP library Fly System and like makes it available to Drupal. Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh.
Just a quick another one. I was just wondering, why did you end up defining like a custom entity instead of using something like paragraphs, for example?
Oh. That's good.
Paragraphs, we spent a lot of time prior to this launch working out the structure of our content and how to organize our body field, and we really didn't feel it was appropriate for put paragraph in front of our editors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Other questions? In the back?
Could you talk a little bit more about what you do with that layout display on the front end?
Oh.
Does that setting turn into a layout changing your React app? Do you have different
Oh.
templates or?
In the React app, yeah, I think there are a couple of different templates. I'm probably not the best person to ask about that, but
Here. Can you pull up that page?
yeah. I'm sorry. It was asking about how the templates in that on that page like map out to the React application, right?
Right. So you set that layout in Drupal to grid or
Mm-hmm.
whatever it was, and then I was just wondering what you do in React to switch templates.
Yeah. Let's bring it up. Let's do it. We'll see if the network works for us.
Okay.
Get the,
you want? Yeah.
Let's do it.
Oh, this is the wrong one. I'm just going to close that one. Okay. This is it.
Okay, so an example on this one, let's go to topics. So this is the wrong one. Okay, so this is the one we're looking at. We have new teachers on the top. I'm going to just move it, and I'm going to put.
Oh, but this is staging. So just
Yep.
make sure you. Okay.
Yep. Okay, so I put a different block on the top. I just made the change. I could actually go into the block and change any of the details.
Yeah, then you have that component display, you set list. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Just hit publish.
Yeah, you just need to make sure you understand. Okay, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
If you reload it, I think you have to scroll down.
You got an error.
Did
We
it
got an
finish?
error on your form validation.
Oh yeah. Well, it's
Oh, content has been oh, you know why? It's because it's open.
yeah, it's open in two places.
Yeah. Just reload this page.
Did we save it?
Uh,
Yeah, let's do it again.
yeah.
And that's cached.
It might be cached now.
I'm not getting it.
Did it? I don't know if it saved the form state after I reloaded the page though.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's do it again. Yeah, I mean it's really simple. So
I'll make sure it's published.
yeah. There it is. So it's basically that module we talked about, Save Query, is rebuilding the pieces. It would rebuild the individual pieces, and then we just changed the order of the layout. that's in the JSON response.
Yeah, yeah, and I believe we do have separate templates for each of those in React. I'm not exactly, I think we are using something like specifically like in the JSON response to like know which one to use.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm just curious, there's like fully separate templates.
Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah.
I also have a favor. Will you guys take a look at the revision support issue in JSON API?
Yeah.
Tell us if it would solve your problems.
Absolutely.
We will.
That'd be great.
I mean, I was thinking about doing
We've
that.
looked
right
at it
after
many times actually, but we'll look again.
Yeah, there's some new stuff.
Yeah.
this. Well, yeah, I haven't looked at the new stuff yet, so
Other questions?
yeah.
So, how was the how did the editors take not having the flexibility to essentially like site build landing pages and things like that? Now everything was forced into a more regimented, templated world. Were they not cool with it, or
It was no change for our editors because we had a similar system on Drupal 7.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, but also our editors don't really want to. I mean, we give them the control they need. They control the placement. They can't do responsive layouts, and that's beyond their capabilities.
Got it.
Yeah. I mean, part of it too is like we did kind of want to make sure that was locked down for design.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Sorry.
Last question.
What about the use case that you have to use? You have to use the Fastly and the CloudFront, right? Why did
Fastly
you
versus
use
CloudFront?
Oh, so the reason why I was using CloudFront specifically for images was to be able to configure it so that when it redirected for Lambda, because there's also some other config in there too with the S3 bucket, because CloudFront is actually not pointed at the S3 bucket. It's actually pointed at like the little HTML site that you can create in S3, so that I could write some specific rules around redirections in there, because I wanted it like when it redirected to redirect back to the Lambda function, and that's why the images have CloudFront in front of them instead of Fastly.
So you couldn't do that in the Fastly?
No, I couldn't do it in Fastly. I mean, some of that may have changed, but I don't think that there'd be a way with the way that's implemented.
Okay, you said that, another question, the last one. You said that you are using the
Fly system?
fly system, right?
Yeah, it's
Why not using the S3FS?
well, it wasn't stable.
Issue queue.
Yeah.
But the fly system is stable?
Yeah, it's stable, or it's marked as stable anyway. And there were some other issues with it that I had, like specifically around getting back like cache data, or it would spend a long time like getting back like metadata from S3, and it was an issue with just taking a long time on certain pages.
Okay,
So
for you, the fly system is more quick, more fast than the S3.
well, part of the reason why I ended up using Lambda was like specifically so that I didn't have to deal with image generation in Drupal, because that was actually really slow with like having S3 connected. So like I think Fly System would be pretty slow too, but I don't think it didn't have the same issue that I was running into though with S3FS, because that's initially the module I tried to use it with. But yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yeah.
Okay, with that, I think we'll wrap. Thank you.